Have you ever sat alone in a quiet room, listening to the ticking of the clock, and suddenly wondered how the world got so silent? Once there were little footsteps running through the halls, laughter echoing in the living room, voices asking questions, demanding help with homework, arguing over who gets the last cookie, asking for bedtime stories, pleading for 5 more minutes before sleep. And now there's just the hum of appliances and your own thoughts trying to make sense of where everyone went. You poured your life into them, didn't you? You gave them food, clothes, education, discipline, and love. You raised them with the hope that when your body grew old and tired, their arms would hold you the way you once held them. You imagined your future with them still in it. Sunday dinners, phone calls just to check in, someone by your side when your hands tremble and your knees weaken. But here you are, aging and aching while the phone stays silent. And visits are rare if they happen at all. And you ask yourself that heartbreaking question, the one most parents whisper in shame and confusion: why did my children leave me? Before we go deeper, if this message is already stirring something inside you, if you feel like this speech is speaking to a truth you've kept buried for years, then I encourage you to like this video, subscribe to the channel for more content like this, and leave your thoughts or your personal situation in the comments. I read them, I respond, and sometimes the healing begins with just admitting the pain. So let's talk about the truth no one tells you. The truth is not simple. It's layered, painful, and requires courage to confront. Most parents believe they did their best, and they probably did. But there's a difference between doing your best and doing what your child emotionally needed. What they needed might not have been what you were taught to give. You see, love without emotional connection often feels like obligation. Discipline without empathy can feel like rejection. Providing without listening can feel like absence. Children remember how you made them feel more than what you gave them. That's the first hard truth. Many parents raise their children in survival mode. They worked long hours, struggled financially, navigated trauma of their own, and still managed to keep the household running. That deserves honor. But children don't always see that struggle. They experience presence and absence, affection and harshness, safety or fear. If the emotional environment was cold, demanding, or critical, children often grow up craving distance from it, not because they hate you, not because they are ungrateful, but because they learn to associate you with emotional pain, pressure, or a sense of never being good enough. And let me say something that might hurt, but it needs to be said. Some children leave not because they don't love their parents, but because they never felt truly loved by them. They felt controlled, judged, or dismissed. They felt unheard. They felt that they had to shrink their emotions, their dreams, their identity to be accepted. So they spent years waiting to be old enough to escape and build a life where they could breathe, where they could finally feel like themselves. And when they left, it wasn't revenge, it was survival. Now, let's talk about guilt, not theirs, yours. Because as you sit with that aching silence, you begin to question everything. You replay memories, you wonder if maybe you were too strict, too busy, too harsh, too tired, and sometimes you blame yourself completely. Other times you blame them. They are selfish, entitled, influenced by the wrong people. But blame doesn't bring healing, it just builds walls. What brings healing is honest reflection. Did you ever apologize to your children when you were wrong? Did you create a home where they felt safe to share their feelings without being punished or ridiculed? Did you ever ask them how they were doing emotionally, not academically, not behaviorally, but in their hearts? We are a generation of parents who often prioritize performance over presence, obedience over understanding. and discipline over dialogue. And now we are paying the emotional cost. Our children grew up, they became adults, and they learned that being around people who don't validate their feelings is emotionally draining. They learned that love should feel safe, and if you didn't feel that way at home, they created space between you and them to protect themselves. That's not rebellion, that's trauma-informed self-preservation. But let me give you hope, it's not too late. The heart of a child, even the adult child, longs to feel seen and understood by their parents. They might be distant now, they might even say they've moved on, but the bond between parent and child is never truly broken, it's just wounded. And wounded relationships can heal, but not with pressure, guilt, or manipulation. They heal with presence, humility, and patience. If you want your child to come back to you, don't chase them with complaints. Don't guilt them into visits. Don't tell them how much you sacrifice and how ungrateful they are. That just deepens the emotional distance. Instead, begin with the message they waited their whole life to hear. I see now that I made mistakes. I may not have known better, but I want to learn now. I miss you not just because I am old or lonely, but because I want to know who you are, what you feel, and what you need from me. That level of vulnerability is scary, but it is also powerful. It begins to rebuild trust. It lets your child know you're not trying to control them anymore. You're trying to connect. So how do you reconnect? First, become curious, not about their achievements, but about their heart. Ask about their life without giving advice unless they ask. Respect their boundaries, even if they sting. Celebrate their choices even if they're different from your own. And don't expect immediate return visit or phone calls. Healing takes time. Show up with consistency, not just in crisis. Don't be a parent only when you need something. Be a parent who listens even when nothing is required. Let's also talk about parenting culture. Many of you were raised in environments where expressing emotion was considered weakness, where children were to be seen and not heard, where love was shown through duty and not tenderness. You passed down what you knew, but now you have a chance to grow. Emotional intelligence can be developed at any age. Learn the language of empathy. Start with that must have been hard for you instead of you shouldn't feel that way. Validate their pain, even if you don't agree with it, even if it hurts to hear. Healing begins when someone feels safe to speak their truth, and that someone needs to be you. Children under harsh truth. Some children stay physically present but emotionally distant. They'll visit, call, send gifts. But you feel the coldness. They're doing their duty, but not engaging from love. That's because the wound hasn't healed. Presence doesn't always mean connection. If you want their heart back, not just their time, you must create safety, not obligation. Your children aren't heartless, they are human. And humans protect themselves from pain. Some children grow up carrying unspoken trauma from their parents. Anger that was never addressed, favoritism that was never admitted, comparisons that left scars, silence that echoed louder than words. They might not bring it up because they think you won't listen, or worse, that you'll deny it. If you want reconciliation, you must be strong enough to listen without defending, apologizing without justifying, and loving without demanding. You may be thinking, but I never abused them. I never abandoned them. I was always there. And that might be true. But trauma isn't always about what happened. Sometimes it's about what didn't happen. The hugs that weren't given, the I'm proud of you that was never said, the eye contact that was always rushed. the emotional presence that was missing even when you were physically there. Don't minimize their pain because you did your best. Acknowledging their pain doesn't erase your effort. It just shows them that your love is now mature enough to understand the past. So what do you do now? You begin again. You start showing up emotionally, not just practically. You call not to remind them of their duties, but to ask about their dreams. You write letters, not to beg, but to tell stories, express love, share your heart. You heal yourself too. You confront your own childhood wounds so that you don't bleed them into your parenting anymore. You forgive yourself for what you didn't know, and you forgive them for the distance they needed in order to heal. In the end, your legacy will not be determined by how many rules you enforced, how many trophies they won, or how clean your house was. It will be defined by how your children felt in your presence. Did they feel safe, heard, loved, or did they feel judged, pressured, and unseen? That is what echoes in their hearts into adulthood. That is what determines whether they run to you or from you in your old age. If you've listened this far, I know you're not here to blame or complain. You're here to change. And that's powerful. That takes courage. It's not too late to become the parent your child needed. Even now, it starts with humility, it continues with empathy, and it ends with healing that can ripple across generations. Your children didn't leave because they stopped loving you. They left because they didn't feel emotionally safe. Show them you've changed, not through words alone, but through actions. To them, they can come home, not to obligation, but to warmth. And maybe, just maybe, they'll return, not because they have to, but because they want to. If this touched something in your heart, if it made you reflect, try, or understand something you hadn't before, then I encourage you again, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and most importantly, share your thoughts and your story in the comments. What have you experienced? What would you like to say to your child or to your parent? Let's turn pain into healing. Let's begin again. Here are 2 key points for all of you. Have you ever looked at an old family photo and felt the weight of silence more than the warmth of memory? Have you ever found yourself standing in a quiet room staring at the front door, not because someone is coming in, but because someone hasn't come home in years? You raised them. You fed them. You stayed up at night when they were sick. You taught them how to ride a bike, packed their lunch, drove them to school, watched them grow. You gave them your time, your money, your energy. And yet now, as you grow older, they are nowhere to be found. Not in your home, not on your phone, and sometimes not even in your life. And it breaks you in a way that you can't put into words. You wonder, did they forget? Did they change? Or worse of all, did they stop loving you? Before we go deeper into this truth, I want to pause and invite you with all sincerity to like this video if these words are already stirring something inside you. Subscribe to the channel for more content that speaks directly to the soul, the kind that heals, confronts, and helps us become better. And in the comments below, share your thoughts or your story. What has your experience been with your children as they've grown older? What do you want them to know? What do you need them to hear? I read every single comment, and sometimes healing begins when we finally say out loud what we've been carrying inside for far too long. Now, let's talk about the truth. The one that no one tells you, the one that society brushes under the rug, the one that hurts but also heals when we're brave enough to face it. You know, children don't always leave because they stopped loving their parents. That's what most people assume. That's what you might tell yourself when they don't return your calls, don't visit, don't invite you into their world. You whisper to yourself that maybe they've changed, maybe they've been influenced, maybe they're just busy, or maybe they are ungrateful. But what if the truth is something far more painful, far more personal, and far more within our control than we like to admit? What if they didn't leave because they stopped loving you, but because they never felt emotionally safe, seen, or understood during their upbringing? That is a hard truth to swallow, especially for a parent who sacrificed so much. But love is not just about sacrifice. It's not just about keeping the lights on and putting food on the table. Love is about connection. And connection is built through emotional safety. When a child feels like their emotions are dangerous, inconvenient, or unwelcome, they learn to hide them. And when they hide enough of themselves long enough, they begin to feel invisible, even in their own home. Children need more than rules and routines. They need to be known. They need to be understood. They need to be accepted in their full emotional reality, not just when they are achieving, behaving, or smiling, but when they are angry, confused, scared, or breaking down. But many of us were raised in homes where emotions were either ignored or punished. And unfortunately, we pass that same emotional climate down to our children, not because we were cruel, not because we didn't care, but because we didn't know any better. We thought love was structure. We thought discipline was love. You thought providing was enough, but the child's heart longs for more than provision. It longs for protection, not just of the body, but of the soul. So what happens when the child grows up in a home where they can't cry without being told to stop? Where they can't ask questions without being labeled disrespectful, where their anger is punished but never explored, where their dreams are minimized, their fears dismissed, and their individuality suppressed. What happens is that child begins to feel emotionally unsafe, not in the sense of physical danger, but in the deep invisible sense that says, who I truly am is not okay here. And so they put on mask. They become what you want. They obey. They succeed. They smile. But inside, they are disconnected. They are slowly packing emotional bags, preparing to walk away the moment they gain the freedom to choose where their heart belongs. And then the day comes, they move out, they go to college, they get married, they start a career, and you wait for the calls, the visits, the I miss you, mom, or how are you, dad? But instead there's silence, or surface level communication, or distance you can't explain. And the pain begins, the confusion, the self-doubt, the anger. You wonder why the child you raised, the child you gave everything to, no longer wants to be around you. But here's the truth. They're not staying away to hurt you. They're staying away to protect themselves, because somewhere deep down, being around you triggers a version of themselves they spent years trying to escape. A version that didn't feel good enough, a version that felt judged, misunderstood, or invisible. And they are not avoiding you, they're avoiding the feeling that being with you brings. That's the wound, that's the unspoken pain, that's a legacy we must reckon with. Emotional safety isn't a concept that just applies to therapy rooms and textbooks. It's the foundation of every lasting relationship, especially the one between parent and child. When a child feels emotionally safe, they open up. They tell you their fears, their doubts, their struggles, not because you demand it, but because they trust that you won't use it against them. Because they know you listen without trying to fix or control, because they feel seen even when they are not perfect, because your love feels like refuge, not a prison. But when emotional safety is missing, everything else begins to collapse. The child may still get good grades, they may still smile in pictures, they may still say, I love you, but inside they are surviving, not thriving. And when they finally have the power to choose where they invest their emotional energy, they drift. Not because they are cruel, but because they are tired of pretending, tired of walking on eggshells, tired of seeking approval that never came, tired of being raised but never truly known. If you're hearing this and it stings, if you're realizing that maybe, just maybe, your child didn't feel emotionally safe in your home, don't run from that truth. Sit with it, let it speak, let it teach you, because awareness is the beginning of transformation. You can't change what you deny, but you can heal what you're willing to face. Your child still carries your voice in their head, your words, your silence, your reactions, those moments when they cried and you turned away, those times they opened up and you shut them down, those years they longed to be understood but instead were told to get over it or toughen up. Those things didn't disappear. They became part of how they see themselves. And you have the power even now to rewrite some of that narrative, but only if you're willing to lead with humility. Healing doesn't begin with demanding that they call more often. It doesn't begin with guilt or lectures or complaints. It begins with one of the most powerful sentences a parent can ever say. I'm sorry, I didn't know, I want to do better. That sentence opens doors that lectures will never unlock. That sentence reaches a child's heart more than 1,000 reminders of how much you sacrificed, because your children already know what you gave them. What they need to know is, where you see what was missing. Emotional safety is not about being perfect. It's not about letting children do whatever they want. It's about creating a space where their truth is welcome, where their voice matters, where they don't have to perform to be loved, where they don't have to agree with you to be accepted, where they can be honest without being punished. That's the kind of safety that draws children home, even as adults. And you can create that space even now. It's never too late to become a safe parent. Even if your child is grown, even if years have passed, even if there's been silence, the heart remembers and the heart can heal. But you must lead with love, not control, with presence, not pressure, with curiosity, not criticism. Call your child not to remind them of what they owe you, but to ask how they're really doing. Write them a letter, not to complain, but to share your heart. Sit with your own pain, not to wallow, but to understand what patterns did you inherit, what wounds did you carry into your parenting, what emotional tools were you never taught. The more you understand yourself, the more you can love your child with empathy, not just effort. Let go of the need to be right. Let go of the image of the perfect parent. Let go of the story that says, I did everything and they still left, and instead embrace a new story. One where healing is possible, where humility is strength, and where love is not about control but connection. The greatest gift you can give your child now is not money, not advice, not reminders. It's your presence, your honest, open-hearted, emotionally available presence. That's what they needed then. And that's what they still long for now. Children don't stop loving their parents, but they do stop trusting them emotionally if they've been hurt too often, dismissed too deeply, or misunderstood too long. And trust can only be rebuilt when safety is restored. So today, choose to become emotionally safe, not perfect, not flawless, just safe. Safe enough to say, tell me more, instead of you're overreacting. Safe enough to ask, how did that make you feel, instead of that's not what happened. Safe enough to say, I'm sorry, without explaining why you did it. Safe enough to hold space for their truth, even when it's hard to hear, because when children feel emotionally safe, They come back not just to visit, not just out of duty, but because your love feels like home again. If this message has opened your eyes, touched your heart, or stirred something within your soul, I invite you one more time to like this video, subscribe and to the channel, and most importantly, leave your story or your reflection in the comments. Your words matter, your pain matters, and your healing is possible. There comes a moment in every parent's life when the house falls silent, not because your children have gone out for the day or have fallen asleep in their rooms, but because they've built a life far away from you, emotionally, mentally, and perhaps even physically. That silence is not just in the walls around you, it echoes in your chest, in your soul, where memories of their laughter used to live. You find yourself staring at old photographs, replaying old videos, scrolling through their social media, wondering what you did wrong. You wonder how the same hands that once held you so tightly now pull away, how the same eyes that once looked to you with trust now barely make contact. And in the privacy of your own heartbreak, you ask the question that haunts millions of parents around the world: why have my children left me? And deeper still, why don't they seem to want to come back? Before you set into guilt or throw blame like daggers at your own reflection, I want to offer you a truth that may sting, but it also might set you free. Your children didn't leave you because they stopped loving you. They left because they didn't feel emotionally safe, seen, or understood while they were growing up. And if you're still listening, if you're still breathing, then let me tell you something powerful. Reconnection is not only possible, it's waiting for you. But the bridge back to your children isn't paved with guilt trips, unsolicited advice, or pressure-filled conversations. It's paved with humility, with empathy, and with your full non-judgmental presence. That's what this journey is about. Many parents try to fix the disconnect by pointing out everything they did for their kids. They list the sacrifices, the sleepless nights, the tuition fees, the meals, the rules, the effort. And yes, you did all of that. But the currency of connection isn't built in deeds, it's built in emotional safety. If your child never felt free to cry in front of you without being told to toughen up, if they couldn't share a mistake without being punished or shamed, if they didn't feel accepted when they were most vulnerable, then a piece of their emotional world slowly learned to protect itself by creating distance. That distance grows over time, not out of hatred, but as a survival mechanism. And now you are left with the result: a polite phone call on holidays, a like on Facebook, a rushed visit, or maybe even complete silence. You think they are ungrateful, but the truth is they are still hurting. If you want your children back, not just physically but emotionally, you must let go of the instinct to defend yourself. You must release the need to explain your good intentions. This is not about you convincing them you are a good parent. This is about helping them feel like they can finally be themselves around you without fear. Lea Tamta. Reconnection begins not with a lecture, but with a pause. It begins not with a speech, but with a question. It begins not with answers, but with presence. Ask yourself, when was the last time you simply sat with your child, whether in person or on the phone, and just listened, not to correct them, not to guide them, but to understand them? True humility is not weakness. It's the greatest strength a parent can possess when trying to rebuild a lost connection. It's the ability to say, I may not have gotten it all right, but I want to understand your pain. It's the courage to admit I may have missed some things that matter deeply to you. Humility does not say you should be grateful for all I've done. It says I care more about you than about being right. That's the key to unlocking the heart that has closed its door to you. Children no matter how old they are not asking for perfect parents. They are asking for real parents, emotionally available parents, parents who can handle hearing uncomfortable truths without reacting in anger or defensiveness. When your child tells you they felt alone even while living under your roof, don't rush to say, "But I was always there." Sit with it. Let that discomfort marinate. When they tell you they felt judged for their choices, don't argue that you're only trying to protect them. Ask what they needed instead. When they finally open up about wounds you didn't know existed, don't collapse under the weight of your guilt or shift the conversation back to yourself. Creating the emotional safety looks like. It's not about having all the right words. It's about being the person who can hold space for another without needing to control the outcome. Empathy is not a strategy, it's a way of being. It's stepping into your child's shoes, not to correct their path, but to understand the terrain they walked. It's giving up your agenda and sitting in their emotional world long enough for them to believe you care more about their heart than about your reputation. Advice is easy to give, but advice rarely heals. What heals is being heard. What heals is a parent saying, "Tell me more," instead of, "Here's what I think you should do." Your children don't need another advisor, they need an ally. Someone who can witness their story without rewriting it, someone who can sit in the ashes of their pain without rushing to sweep it all away. Presence is more powerful than pressure. You may want to fix the silence with more phone calls, more visits, more lectures about family values, but pressure only deepens the divide. Presence says, "I'm here when you're ready." It's not passive, it's patient. It doesn't chase after love like a beggar, it stands like a lighthouse. Reconnection doesn't happen in a day. It doesn't follow your timeline. It unfolds as trust is rebuilt slowly. And that trust grows when your children see that they can bring their whole selves to you without fear of judgment or manipulation. There may be moments when your child still pulls away. That's okay. Healing is not linear. There may be words they use that sting. Let them speak. Let them grieve, let them process. And every time you choose to respond with humility instead of defensiveness, every time you offer empathy instead of instruction, every time you show up without trying to control the moment, you are sowing seeds in the soil of reconnection, seeds that may one day blossom into phone calls that are no longer forced, visits that are no longer guilt-driven, and conversations that go deeper than surface-level small talk. Reconnection requires the death of ego and the birth of emotional courage. It's not about getting your old relationship back. It's about creating something new, something stronger, something more honest. It's about seeing your child not just as your son or daughter, but as a human being with thoughts, emotions, history, and wounds that deserve to be honored. And when you honor them, not because you agree with everything they say, but because you love them enough to meet them where they are, that's when transformation begins. Listening to these and you feel like it's too late, let me assure you it's not. As long as there is breath, there is a chance to begin again, a chance to repair what was broken, a chance to become the parent your child always needed, even if it's later in life. It's not about erasing the past. It's about choosing a different future, one moment at a time. So go and write that letter you've been scared to send. Make that call, not to advise, not to guilt, but to listen, show up, not to force a relationship, but to say, "I am here." Sit with their silence if that's all they can give right now. Cry if you must. Apologize without expectation.